church, and then you send them off to somebody else, indebt them to their eyeballs, and they never end up coming back to your church. Isn't that weird? I think the Lord's going to fix this for us in the very near future, to be perfectly honest with you, because I think that any school that will stand on biblical morality and ethics will soon not be able to get a dime of government money. And that's going to change a lot of this. We're going to see a lot of ingrown in the church, churches cooperating with other churches locally to do Christian education and training of ministries rather than shipping them off someplace else. But the reality is, that's what we've been doing for a long time. When I look at the New Testament, the only thing I find about training up men is that Paul says to Timothy, train up men that you've been able to observe, you know their character, and you teach them everything that I've taught you. Sounds like it happens in the church. Strange. Now, don't get me wrong, I benefited from my seminary experience. Of course, back then, you didn't have to debt yourself to your eyeballs to do that. I'm awful glad that I learned the biblical languages and things like that, but you know, with technology the way it is today, you don't have to do that the same way we used to do it. And it concerns me because, obviously, the most effective way by which anti-Christian liberal thought has been promulgated has been through the Christian academy, through the idea of academic freedom. Now think about it. If you're going to write a PhD dissertation in the vast majority of seminaries or colleges today, you have to come up with something no one's ever done before. Now think about that for just a moment when it comes to Christian orthodoxy. I need to come up with something new. Now, there are areas where you can do that. For example, I was talking with Dan Wallace once I was asking him about the syntax of a particular construction from the Greek Septuagint that's used in the book of Romans. And I asked him, since he's written a lot on syntax, I said, would this particular construction include within its meaning this kind of temporal accomplishment? He says, well, I hesitate to answer that. That would be a great dissertation topic. In other words, more work needs to be done before you can really give a good answer to the question that I was asking. So there are areas where you could do that kind of thing. But especially when it comes to theology, having to come up with something new means you have to come up with something heretical. Simply going more in depth in orthodoxy is frowned upon. Coming up with something new that isn't orthodoxy, that'll get you published. And so is it any wonder, especially Europe, we had a state church. By the way, Christianity is not genetic. It's not passed on genetically. Therefore, state churches tend to become dead churches in about 3 generations. And so when you create a state church and then give it lots of money to educate people, it'll be educating them in dead stuff pretty quickly. And that's what happened in Germany. And that's where the German, Tübingen and places like that, German critical theories began to arise. You started cutting the Old Testament up into pieces. And Old Testament studies has never recovered from that. We gave Old Testament studies up a long time ago. We really did. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't real good guys out there, but the ones that are published, the ones that have all the positions and the faculty positions, things like that, oh man. It is hard to find believing Old Testament scholars today. They are few and far between in comparison to, numerically, those that are not. And the publishing houses tend to publish the wrong ones. But it all comes back to the fact that I really don't think 1 Corinthians chapter 1 has been taken seriously by the vast majority of Christians. Verse 18 says, for the message of the cross is to them who are perishing foolishness, but to we who are being saved, it is the power of God. Now, if you look at the original language, those who are perishing and we who are being saved are absolutely parallel to one another. So you have 2 different groups, and the same message is heard and accepted and understood differently depending on which of those 2 groups you are in. To those who are perishing, the gospel will always always, always be foolishness. The term that Paul uses there, moria, is the term for which you get moron. It's moronic foolishness to those who are perishing. And it will always be that way. And unfortunately, I mentioned I was at that ETS meeting in '98. I did not enjoy my time there. There are only two things I enjoyed about that meeting at ETS. Roger Nicole lumbering up to the microphone saying, "Guys, we didn't want any Roman Catholics in the group." That was a highlight.
Yeah.
And then standing at the NET desk with Dan Wallace for an hour arguing about the Carmen Christi from the Greek text, but neither one of us had a Greek text with us, because we both memorized it. So those are my highlights of that. Other than that, I was absolutely disgusted by the attitude of the scholars, viewing themselves as the knights in shining armor, coming to rescue the benighted church. I'm just too much of a churchman to put up with that kind of foolishness. And so I didn't enjoy my time there. And that attitude, unfortunately, is very pervasive. Now, I'm not saying, I said it's pervasive, I didn't say it's universal. I am thankful for those schools that attempt, for example, to remain connected to local churches and things like that. There are people who recognize the necessity of these things. But, by and large, the reason the Christian Academy has taken the form that it has become the organ through which disbelief and the destruction of entire denominations has come, is primarily because they don't really believe what's said in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. They don't really believe that the gospel has to be foolishness to those who are perishing. There's got to be a way to make it sound good. There's got to be a way for us to be with the wise of the world. And yet Paul's going to go on to say, has not God made foolishness the wisdom of the world? He's going to say, in the wisdom of God, the world, through its wisdom, did not come to know God. I have made myself really unpopular amongst apologists because I frequently criticize the best known apologist in the world today, William Lane Craig. William Lane Craig is a part of the Mere Christianity movement. He clearly has a massive imbalance between theology and philosophy. I've had a friend who was at a conference he was at, listened to him say to a bunch of young men who had gathered around him, if you want to become good apologists, you need to stop reading so much theology and start reading philosophy. I heard him say it. Mm-hmm. And I hear it in his debates all the time. And I've seen many a young man destroyed by fascination of man's philosophy. But don't get me wrong, there is a Christian philosophy. There is a Christ-honoring way of viewing the world, but it is subject to the revelation of Scripture.
Amen. That's right.
And every time it steps out from underneath the Lordship of Christ, it becomes poison.
That's right.
Poison. I've seen it too many times. And so, I see a form of Christian academic arrogance and fear. Ever thought about the fact that used to be the majority of people who graduated from seminaries who did doctor work got a THD, Doctor of Theology? There's almost no seminary left in the United States that offers a THD. It's all PhD, Doctor of Philosophy. Why? So you can cross-teach. You can go to secular university. You can teach there. You're not branded with that religious degree. Why? Well, because the world is absolutely offended by anyone who will do scholarship under the Lordship of Christ.